Dave, we're grateful for your leadership, everything that you do for Encompass, making us better, your continuous support. The panels over the years that you've put together, we're just very, very thankful. And so I just wanted to come up real quickly. I'm going to let you introduce your panel and talk about the things that are important with each of the individual panelists. But I just wanted to come up here and thank you.
Well, thank you, Chip.
And y'all have a great discussion.
It's amazing what happens at the closing parties. And this one goes back to New Orleans in 2017 in the spring is when this started, I guess. So I guess 7.5 years. David Wench, Vice President of Sales and Marketing at Accent Networks. I also chair the committee that's advising the board in the areas of membership and events. If you were here in the last session, you heard me say that these tech panels discussions is something new we're doing. One of the ideas is expanding the tech, looking to expand the tech representation at the show. We certainly welcome feedback and comments as far as the content and things to do as we look to continue with this. So I'm going to let each of the members introduce themselves, and what we've asked them to do is actually provide you with a statement that speaks to the value for the industry players in the audience to prioritize API adoption and what benefits you see that translates to a better overall way of doing business for each other, or for each of them. So each of the panel is going to introduce who they are and their thoughts with respect to that statement, and we'll start with Ben.
Well, I appreciate it very much. For all those who don't know, I'm Ben Edmond. I'm the CEO and founder of ConnectBase. ConnectBase is a cloud-based platform for this industry. We help facilitate API flows between buyers and sellers across just over 400 providers to date. My response to this statement really is centered around participation and the concept of participation. Like prioritizing APIs from a buyer, from a seller perspective is absolutely mission critical in today's world of busy. There's just not enough hours in the day to keep up with the demands on both sides. And APIs, give that opportunity to make sure that you're participating in the deal flow, the opportunities that your business needs. And if you think about from a seller's perspective, you want to show up when your buyer needs you the most as a partner. And from a buyer's perspective, you want to be data-driven, responsive, and facilitating that flow back to the sellers that are looking for the information to go close the deal. And APIs are really the key facilitator of that reality today. None of us have enough time to swivel chair into 47 portals. It is an API-driven world today.
Very good, Ben. Yeah. So my name is Matt Hartley. I'm a product director for MetTel. I kind of focus on dashboards, analytics, and APIs. And talking to Ben actually before the panel started, swivel chairing, that is the #1 reason to integrate, whether it's with Telecom, but in general. So we do this all the time. To go from ServiceNow into at MetTel, our Bruin platform would be a disaster. So to eliminate the errors, to improve your efficiencies in your operations, you got to integrate.
Absolutely. Excellent.
Okay, Rick?
Yes, so good afternoon, everybody. I'm Rick Medeiros. I lead sales for Verizon Partner Solutions. It's kind of a different spin, I would say, for me in the sales role. Really, when I look at the values of what APIs brings to my organization, it's really a complete game changer for us, right? Where else could we have the same level of interactions with our customers, right? Whether that's just a check on availability of our network services, the quoting aspect, the ordering aspect, just the ease of doing business. It's a complete and utter game changer, and we wouldn't be able to handle it otherwise, right? We also wouldn't be in the game if we didn't have the right type of customer experience with that as well. So it's definitely very important, and certainly looking forward to the discussion.
Thanks, Rick. Anand.
All right, I'm Anand Rathi. I'm in from TransUnion, and for those of you who don't know, TransUnion, in addition to doing all the credit stuff they do, they acquired a company, Newstar, which I used to work for, and Newstar is in order management. I have been doing in the product management group and managing the access between the carriers. So when carriers order access between each other, that's the product which I manage. So about the API, I think one of the most common things which we have heard these days is, do more with less. We all are tasked to do more with less. And how do you do that? You have to have scalability to be able to achieve. And that comes from API. So that's the only way to do it. The API lets you do the business in a much more efficient way and ultimately brings customer experience. I think a decade back, customer experience didn't have that much of value, but today it is very critical. If you don't provide a good customer experience, they will go. They are okay to spend more and go to somebody else who can give in-time status and updates rather than waiting and not knowing what's happening. So that's the API story.
Well, thank you. Well, we're going to let you kick it off with the first question. How can service providers work together to drive API standardization in a highly competitive market while also addressing the unique needs of different stakeholders?
All right. So one thing is there, right, in our industry here, everybody has a different way of doing things.
Yes.
How much ever you say externally, but internally, it just works very different. And if we have to work in a different way, and that's how the business has evolved and grown, but if you need to communicate your status outside externally in a right way without having to do stool chairs, without having to do training, without having to depend upon people's memory, then the partnership or the API standardization is the way to do it. That way, the internal processes can remain as they are, and every company works the way they have to or want to or work best. But then an API way is how you present the status externally in a common standard way and communicate to the external world of how you're progressing your orders, your statuses, etc.
All right. Well, Rick, how about a Verizon sales point of view?
I agree 100% with Ahmad. It's standardization is key, right? Making sure that we're all on the same page. It's ease of use as far as rolling out new APIs. It certainly helps if you're aligned with the standards. I would also say the most important thing that people in the room can be doing is working with those service organizations, right? The TM Forum, the MEF, aligning to those standards, understanding what they are, but then also being vocal, right? Talking about your business and how you operate on a daily basis, and hopefully that leads to, just improvements across the entire industry overall. So that's definitely how I see it.
All right. Matthew, Ben, anything you guys would like to add?
This is I looked through all those questions we went through, and and we just had that session on AI. So I'm a huge fan of generative AI, and I think it's going to completely disrupt how we do integration.
It built this whole panel, right?
Pretty much. So in terms of onboarding customers and dealing with their different business processes that they have, it's going to completely change that game. To the point where the integration is just going to automatically happen. So not to just harp on AI, because I'm sure we've heard so much about it, but
Right, I'm with you though.
it's a huge game changer.
I would just add that, one, wholeheartedly agree with the panelists. Standardization, I think, is key for us all to scale. But maintaining that competitiveness, think about the payload, the performance, how you're delivering your API, and the experience you create, little things that are big things, the documentation, the ease of doing business around it, the analytics you provide to support the relationship after, all opportunities to, elevate above just having the standards in place. But firm believer, standards are critical for us all to scale.
All right. So Matthew, let's go to the second question. Given the critical importance of security, how are companies working together to establish shared security protocols for API transactions without compromising competitive interests?
Well, at MetTel, we use a standard open authorization format for our APIs, which it's been around for quite a while. So basically, you can go into our Broom portal, you can get a client ID and client secret so that you can authorize with our identity providers. Then when you go through that process, you get a bearer token. If you're familiar, this is getting pretty technical, but it's how we do security for our APIs. And that bearer token that comes back, it's good for 60 minutes, and then you have to reauthorize. But we take it a little step further, and whether or not this is something you would standardize, but we create an access control list. So not only do we have our core OAuth handshake for API security, but we also create an access control list. And that allows us to throttle and control any bad actors and shut them off immediately. So that's a little bit different. Whether that's like a standard, I think many API gateways use this. We actually built our kind of our own table to do that, but that would be a little bit different that we do. And just sharing that information, I think, is a good start to collaborating on it.
All right. Ben, what would you like to add to that?
I think, one, just doing very similar things in the upfront, handoff process to ensure that security is paramount and top of mind. One of the things that we try to do to embrace the reality that security matters when you're dealing with things as sensitive as pricing and orders, you can't compromise and have a generic perspective on that. So while the security and the handshake are there, we take it all the way through and have this one-for-one trust-based concept across the entire fabric, which ultimately looks like each party on both sides maintain a one-for-one view, secure, encrypted the entire time. What this allows for is unique flows of the payload. So if you have a special relationship with party A that's different than party B, that's different party C, ultimately you want to be able to transact at scale using a standard structure to do so, but have the payload originate and terminate without a generic view, across the marketplace. And to me, that's a really important, thing in the world that we operate, where there's a lot of complexity, there's a lot of different perspectives, and we want to maintain that level of one-for-one trust on both sides. So if somebody wants to run a promotion, do something different, they can ultimately just take action.
All right. Rick, Anand, anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I think I'll just add, for the UOC or the platform where we come, we are at a multi-tenant platform. So just to expand on what Ben said, right? In a multi-tenancy platform, it's very important to maintain the right security. One is obviously what Rick said, like API, right? At an API level, you have security so that nobody's kind of like hacking it on the air. But once it comes in, it's equally important to make sure that the payloads or the structure is going into the right data, and we're not by mistake showing one customer's data to the other customer. So maintaining that level of multi-tenancy and security for internal aspects, keeping the data encrypted in the rest, is very critical for the business we are in.
Anything you want to add?
I think they really summarized it very well.
All right. So before I go to question number 3 with Ben, I just want to take a minute. As I mentioned that I chair this committee. This is the brains of the committee right here. Ben is on the same committee along with a handful of others, but he's the guy with all the great ideas, and then I try to help him and others implement them. But I want to thank Ben for everything he's doing here, and
Thank you.
He's my inspiration in our committee. So anyway, Ben,
The resident telecom nerd.
how are telecom providers leveraging automation to improve API-based transactions, and what collaborative efforts are taking place to ensure seamless integration across networks?
There is so much going on in the industry right now across lots of different dimensions. So I'll sort of break it down in a couple different components. The one I'm most passionate about, that I just believe is ground truth to start everything, is on serviceability. So there's a lot of structure and API automation to go from, hey, I have a network and I put in a new lateral, built a building, and it's on net for the first time. Well, what do? Traditional processes that at some point over the next, 1 day to 6 months, it wound up in somebody's hands and they manually updated a database here, a database there, a database there. Today's reality is that's an automated flow. That's using APIs to take, from the as-built getting created, to closing out the package, to updating inventory, to updating ConnectBase's system, and you're seeing that cycle and flow in deeper and deeper into the industry. and the industry collaborating, because there's no one system out there. There is this collection of lots of systems, and the APIs become the interface for those systems to talk together, reducing fat finger mistakes which happen, which reduces the time delay from one system to another, and ultimately helps us all compete. I think secondly is there's a lot of industry work around MEF, LSO, Sonata API standards to help the interface between parties. We've embraced MEF and, encourage everyone to adopt MEF standards as the, LSO Sonata preference that we have as one that has to build lots of these APIs for our customers, reduces cycles, brings consistency to how people do business together, and we want to see more of that. We see the wireless industry utilizing standards. We see TM Forum, from an interoperability between the OSS, BSS layers using standards, all with APIs to interface between systems and elevate how we do business together. If anyone's looked at the TM Forum list of software companies, over 400 member companies, and there's as many non-member companies out there. If we don't embrace APIs and standards to interface, we will be building, integration for the next, 100 years. We can't afford to do that as an industry. So embracing these different industry groups like MEF, like TM Forum, really helps facilitate the ability to get the job done faster with more certainty. I would be an advocate that we all think about not just the standard in a structure of what the interface looks like, but the performance attributes. Think of your own networks. You put SLAs on latency and packet loss and availability for years. We need to start doing the same things with APIs to ensure the customer experience out there is elevated and puts the best foot forward for all parties competing and partnering across ecosystems.
Matthew?
So at NetTel, what we do is we shield our partners and customers from the automation. So using Bruin, which is our core communications ticketing platform, you'll make an API call to create a ticket for like a MACD or a service delivery request or even a product order. But behind the scenes, we're doing this incredible automation. And it's been evolving for some time, even since I've been at NetTel. It's remarkable what happens behind the scenes. But to our partners and our customers, a phone just arrives and you get a shipping label. Amen to that. But they don't see all of that automation. And that's really that's the key to the whole thing. The API is just a gateway into that.
You make it simple.
We do make it simple.
Yeah, there you go.
Yep.
Rick or Anand, anything you guys like to add?
I would just add, just what we've been going through within Verizon currently. We've had a significant amount of investment in our platform, right? Our customer exchange platform that just makes that more of a lot of the work, like you're saying, is being done on the back end. But just it's all about the customer experience, making sure that they are aware very quickly of the availability and ultimately what needs to be done, and then also making sure that the records are being updated as well is very, very important. And the investments we've made on that the last few years has been significant. So it's a big part of our focus.
I'll take the component of ordering. So typically in ordering, we'll have an OM and a PM group, like order management group and a project management group. And as we said, everybody does things differently, but not just differently. For an order to get from order receipt to all the way to completion, there are multiple different systems. There are multiple groups. Project management have their own way of tracking orders. Engineers have their own way of delivering a circuit. There's a dispatch management. There are so many different groups. There's just no way to have one system. It has to be spread across. And if it's spread across, automation is the only way that they are connected and a common experience is given out to the customer. So it is very important and critical to have automation in build. Otherwise, people are just struggling to get status, struggling to provide status, and it just kills the customer experience.
All right, Rick, we'll let you lead off question 4. How do we ensure interoperability between different providers' APIs in an increasingly complex ecosystem? And what rate does cooperation play, or what role does cooperation play in shaping future innovations?
Yeah, so I would kind of answer that really. That's like a two-part question, right? The first part, once again, it's talking about the industry organizations, the MEF, the TM forums, the standardization. We've been talking about that a lot up here. That's critical, right? To make everything work together and having that consistent approach. The big piece, right, is the working together.
Right.
And ultimately being vocal. We're in the middle of an initiative right now. Our IT lead is actually out there for fourth quarter, and he's meeting with a significant amount of our customers, getting in front of them face to face, not only talking about our platform and the experience, but then also understanding their business specifically and how they interact with us. And what is it that they need to be different than what we're doing today? So a significant amount of investment, just trying to understand that relationship between ourselves as well as our customers to make that overall ease of doing business, customer experience as good as it possibly can be. So a lot of focus on that now.
All right. Anna, what would you like to add?
So on that, like, you know, for I think for Verizon, you're a company, so you have to make sure you're working with everything. But for us, where we are a clearinghouse solution, our whole motto is to make it easy across the carriers, right? We want to understand from every carrier what is critical for them, how does your solution work, and how can we take that and automate and make a easier view for the industry to look at it. So what you just mentioned, that's the motto for us, is to take anybody who's not doing it like that, to take it and enable that kind of a simplicity, that kind of a standardization, that kind of an easy to consume updates and status across the industry.
Okay. Matt or Ben, anything you'd like to?
Yeah, you know, it's like that's one of the challenges too, is that especially if you had an API for a while, if you've developed that API, what happens is you get the requirements from your partner and customer, and then you start to evolve that API to a point where you're meeting their requirements, but you're also meeting their requirements. And now I have this, Ben's gonna hate this, but a massive payload that's probably way too much than what's necessary. So it's a challenge. I think just collaborating on it, making sure that everyone can speak the same language, but again, it's like form and function. You want to provide the function, but you start losing the form.
Yeah.
Essentially.
I think that's a great point. And, you know, one of the ways that we all can do that is, you know, in the world of orders as an example, you know, Newstar and team do more of it than anyone else. It's the standards bodies, it's incorporating them as a fabric out there for orders. Same with us in quoting. Like, how do we all collaborate together so we don't get that, you know, oh, we have one API that's trying to serve every possible iteration of everything, and we think about performance and scale and maintainability. And I think one of the other aspects is that because there's builds involved, you're building from system to system. You know, just because you put out a release and say, hey, I updated my API, doesn't mean it instantly updates everything that it touches. You know, recognize that the other parties on each side have to then go and build to that upgrade, and that requires a development schedule. And in the world of busy, you know, that is not an easy thing to do for this industry, especially, you know, represented in this audience are primarily the wholesale side of the industry. It's not the most resource-rich side of the industry. No offense to anyone in the room. But think about that as we're collaborating together, collaborate roadmaps, collaborate intention, and work with partners like Newstar and ourselves to help facilitate that flow across a very large, complex ecosystem.
All right. Well, before I go back to Rick for question 5, I just wanted to pause for a second. And, you know, as I've mentioned, this afternoon's Telecom track that Ben, the other people of the committee, and myself have recommended to the board that we do, I mean, our goal was, from an INCOMPAS growth point of view, was to help add tech representation within the show, but at the same time, we're not trying to change the show. We're not trying to be something we aren't. And that's the reason, you know, what is the DNA of INCOMPAS? So the idea was to have a tech track along the areas I used the word earlier, co-opetition, as well as policy-related things. So that's what we're trying to do. So one of my questions for Ben, you know, if you see us later or reach out to us, Are we headed down the right track? Does that make sense? Does that provide value? And how can we amplify that value if we are headed down the right track? So, and as you can tell, this one is in the spirit of co-opetition in the wholesale transactions. But Rick, can you share examples of successful partnerships between telecom providers to overcome API challenges, and what were the key drivers for cooperation?
Sure. I would say within Verizon Partner Solutions, the voice of the customer is absolutely critical. We do a lot of different initiatives where we're, not only explaining what our digital ecosystem looks like, where we're headed, what do we need to do differently, trying to understand, as I mentioned previously, about their business, how they interact with us, how those transactions are going to develop. But just really, whether it's our annual partner summit, we carve out time when we have all of our partners together to really dig into this space, whether it's in a breakout session or just specific meetings. We do it at our biannual customer advisory board where we speak about it again. So we are front and center, being as transparent as possible about not only where we are, about where we're heading, and then we always have that opportunity for feedback to help steer us in the directions that our customers need us to go. If I looked at, say, a specific win recently, I would probably point to, this is a pretty massive one, ourselves as well as AT&T and Amman. We've been working for quite some time. ASRs, I'm sure a number of you are very familiar with the whole ASR ordering process, and what we've been working with them on collectively is moving off of that and going to the TM Forum, the MEF standards for ordering, and we are pretty much in the home stretch, right? Which is a pretty massive effort. And for us to get to that point where we are with this, at this moment in time, it's really going to benefit the entire industry. So that's a good example of really just a lot of work, a lot of partnering, and everybody understanding what the end goal is.
Matthew, what would you like to add?
So at Medtel, we're a managed service provider. So we manage network devices and other things, networks too, for our customers and our partners. Using an example, VeloCloud. So we install SD-WAN for our partners and our customers, but we don't want our partners or customers accessing the VeloCloud. Now, I don't want to say the dirty word SLA because I know that always brings up a big conversation, but in order to maintain a service level agreement, we can't have our partners accessing our third-party platforms that we're managing for them. That's when we created our data lake. And so we ingest all of the data from Starlink, from SD-WAN, VeloCloud, and we put it into our data lake, and then we expose it as an API, REST API, using our OAuth handshake. And so that gives our partners and our customers now access to their data without creating some type of risk in the third-party platform. So two examples are Starlink, for example, and the VeloCloud with VMware.
All right. Anand, Ben, anything you guys like to throw on there?
Right, so I just want to thank this thing. Like again, I said, right, we are in the business of clearinghouse, so we make this thing work. So we had a chance to work with Verizon and with AT&T and to take this ASR ordering mechanism to a next level. We're very close to there. We are doing some pilot orders right now, but we're close to going full production. So having a standardization and having a partnership is very important, because if you don't have partnership, right, you can build standard in your own head, you can design a whole product, but if there's nobody using it, nobody utilizing it, that won't be of any use. So, and for the utilization, it just cannot happen in a flash cut. Like you cannot just change the whole industry and start one day, tomorrow you'll start using this. It has to be collaborative, it has to be with partnership, there has to be some partnership established, you connect with them, you work with them, you evolve, and then ultimately we have like a major share, and then everybody will follow. So partnership is very critical in the industry where we are.
I'll piggyback on that on two fronts. One, on the partnership side, we partnered with a large global provider that had built a MEF compliant API and had less than 10 buyers connected to it over the course of 4 years. And, really the challenge of getting resources from their other side of their partner to then build in, one at a time was not simple. Within 12 months, we had that up 6 times what they did in 4 years using the Fabric approach that we brought together, and that's collaborating, ingesting, and connecting to that MEF, standard API, but accelerating across a Fabric. I think another good example of service provider partnership is the one that we have with CMC in Africa. They were a longtime customer of a company we bought out of London, about 18 months ago, LMX. We transitioned them into the ConnectBase Fabric. They'd consistently get about 20% of their quotes automated in Africa, which for all those who have done business in Africa, it's not too shabby. We've gotten that up to 86% across, the serviceability fabric and the global location ID system with major tier 1 providers around the world buying from them, and 86%, automation where they're not hand-holding emails and swivel chairing into systems is a huge productivity gainer, and established a great partnership between the two companies, just as another example.
All right. So Anand, we'll let you lead the next question. What future trends in API technology do you foresee, and how can providers work together to harness these trends to create shared value?
So for the future, I think what I see is a lot of enhanced statuses. Like earlier when we were doing business, it was more like to the point, like you get milestones, but not something more real-time, not something more detailed. And what I see is the way the future is evolving with APIs, you're able to get more, more detailed statuses, more enhanced statuses is what we call these days. So rather than just knowing, hey, we got the order, it's in works, and it'll be delivered on so and so date, and here is the design data for that. Now it's like, okay, I got the permit, I got the construction done. Do I need an infrastructure build or do I need another build? So a lot of that kind of an enhancement is one thing happening there. And the second thing, I think, going back to a little bit of the partnership and with the APIs is everybody calling the same thing, rather than calling everybody with their own names. Otherwise, just I took this example, you can say the build, there's a network build, there's an infrastructure build, there is a complex build, there is a simple build. They're like, it's just everybody calls it the way they want to call it, and that's what they mean. So it's a big translation engine. So with the APIs, that can also in the future, and what I see is, it can try to put everything together in one common language in a standard way. So no matter what you're communicating, the other side is easily able to consume and follow where's the status of the order, rather than trying to have a cheat sheet on the thing that if a vendor A says this, what does it mean? And if the vendor B says this, what does it mean? So those are the future enhancements I see in the APIs happening.
Ben.
I think a couple things come to mind. One, and I'm completely biased, I understand, in this comment, but I think fabrics are, the reality of the future in terms of interfacing across a big complex ecosystem, almost akin to content before the CDNs and after the CDNs. There's just a difference in performance scale, economics, experience, that when you're trying to do business across a wide ecosystem versus a point relationship, it makes a big difference, and I think that will just continue to trend. And to Anand's point, it really is moving to a real-time everything, and decisions of win-loss, economics, positioning, really need to continue to be thoughtful, almost like what the financial industry has to deal with, in a spot market that's operating in milliseconds. There's not too dissimilar path in our future. I think third is AI is going to transform the experiences of all aspects of software, the APIs in general as well, and we should be thinking about that thoughtfully, of how APIs get ingested to how decisions get made in real time to do one thing or the other, and ultimately AI will help shape that, and it is already starting to.
All right. I'd like to add.
want to jump in there?
Sure. I'm certainly not the right person to talk about technologies coming out or advancements in this space, but I'll tell you, just with my conversations with my tech lead, AI is certainly where he's focused on, and really understanding where we need to go is really going to come from everybody in this room, right, working with the industry organizations and stuff like that. But that's ultimately, at least for my discussions, where he sees a lot of opportunity in the future for us.
Yeah, at NetTel, we use a low-code platform called OutSystems. And the OutSystems and low-code has kind of gone through this sort of weird evolution, but just this past week, OutSystems announced their Mentor, which is an AI generator that generates applications. And these are full-blown, full-stack applications that do integration. So it's interesting. I'm not trying to pitch OutSystems, but we do use it as one of our core platforms for development because it lets us get to speed to market. But this is just the future of it, kind of adding to Ben and everyone else's comments about generative AI. But it's there. It's right here, right now, and you just got to take advantage of it.
Absolutely. All right. And if anybody has any questions from the floor, who's got the microphone? We have more questions we can ask here, but if we want to open up, if somebody has a question at this time, if you let know, we'll welcome a question from the floor. Anybody? Oh, we got one over here.
Hey, so thank you for all this information. Question I have, we talk a lot about APIs, self-service. How do you wrap the sales teams around less interaction with their customers, and how do they, what's the next evolution for a sales team is saying, hey, I'm giving up the conversation with the customer because I'm using a lot more self-service. Have you seen that in the industry, and kind of how do we get past that?
Great question. Rick, you want to start it, or do you want to pass?
Yeah, no, I think I would probably, it's not as much less interaction with the salespeople. I don't want to be working myself and my team out of their job because of APIs, but I think it affords them to have different conversations, right? And obviously take that work off of their plate, and then they're having more strategic type of conversations. And then also, when the opportunity does present itself, I think you have those resources and those tools to be able to give real-time information back to the customer, whether it's, like I mentioned on the front end, around availability, the quoting aspect that the customer's looking for. So that's kind of how I look at it.
Ben, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, one, wholeheartedly agree. My opinion is it doesn't reduce the amount of conversations at all. It changes the dynamics. For somebody who's been selling in telecom as long as I have, I used to sell 56K private lines for a company called MCI a few years ago. And those were nailed up between 2 points, and if I wanted a third point, I'd have to have a whole nother, private line established. And then Frame Relay came along, and Ethernet came along, and I was out there pitching, NNIs. And NNIs would change the game, where now I had a predefined relationship with the buyer. It didn't change my conversation that I was still there as a partner collaborating to drive access orders into those NNI locations, but it absolutely facilitated it. Think of APIs very similar. This is the next generation NNI. You're establishing your bond between your buyer. And what it does is it actually creates the best intent data possible. You are seeing firsthand across those API flows, or you should be if you're not, what your partner is trying to accomplish, and there's different journeys along the way. But if you're excelling in the world of selling in APIs, you're there every step of the way, being a partner and saying, hey, they're trying to close the Sheridan, and you want to be there as part of the process, and you're thinking about how to facilitate those, which might require a conversation, might require whatever it is, but you're getting the data to be transparent. And then every quarter, instead of having a conversation around how you doing, you're actually looking at the data together. hey, quote volumes are up, orders are down, I see a geographic shift, I see multi-tenant locations being where we're winning and single tenants where we're not, what's going on, what we can do together as partners, because frankly, the buyers and sellers in these rooms, they want to be partners. They don't want to be transactional, agnostic relationships. They want to get in there and dig in and be a great partner with Rick, and Rick a great partner to them. It's just how this business evolves, but I don't think it takes away from the conversations. It actually makes the conversations better.
I'd like to jump in here. 40 years in sales management, a little bit of professional selling background of my own. We really want salespeople to go get new business and go sell new business. We really are not looking for a bunch of zookeepers. And those salespeople who stay busy not selling are going to get freed up by some of that stuff, and it's actually going to help. Fair?
Yes, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I've never met a salesperson who ever talked about APIs without a sales engineer sitting right next to them, to be completely honest.
But as far as the work it takes away, I
Yes.
mean, I guess my point there is, there's a lot of busy work that salespeople end up getting into, and they aren't selling. They're just doing busy work. Let's get rid of the busy work. Great, I'm all for that.
Absolutely.
That's that way. All right. Great question.
Great question. Yeah.
Okay, we got another question? Go ahead.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Sophia Yasu. I'm a salesperson at Verizon. So question for either Ben or Anand. If you had to do this all over again, what would you say were one or two things you could have done different?
One or two?
Since you've been there longer, right? What would that be?
You go first.
All right. So I think we touched on the standardization topic, but that's what we'll do, making sure everybody calls the same thing, and not having everybody having their own different representations, and having an external interface being a common across the industry to be able to not just one is the API, but if you get into a little bit of what are the challenges with API, as Rick just touched there, sorry, Matt just touched on that topic. If you have one for there, even though there is API, but then there are so many different things. So being able to do in a cohesive way, and all of us are partners here, right? As Ben said, we all want to coexist. There's just nobody just alone doing business on his own island. Everybody has to depend upon each other because we cannot have a network all over for everyone. So it is something that we have to partner, that's given, and being able to coexist in a cohesive fashion where it's easy to communicate is going to be the thing that will do different.
I've learned a lot of lessons in 9 years since quitting my job and starting ConnectBase. Many things I would do differently, just having the experience to learn those lessons and realize that was not a good decision. But one of the things I would overemphasize, if I could go back in time, is the reality of changing behavior is hard. Whether it's the simple conversations around the API is the new NNI, and you need to have the sellers out there embracing the concept of getting connected via the APIs and talking about it and onboarding into a journey, or thinking about being data driven in the relationship management aspects. But ultimately, the change of behavior is a really hard thing for people that have been doing things for a long time, and not to overestimate or underestimate that reality, and to overemphasize training, support, simplicity, doing everything you can to support that transition, because once they get there, they become the biggest advocates that you have. But it's a journey to get people there to a new way of doing things, and this industry needs a new way of doing things. And we're there in inning 2. We're not in inning 9 yet. We have a lot of work as an industry still to go, and a lot of value share to take back. And ultimately, we're going to get there, but it takes behavior changes.
Can I answer that question real quick?
Go for it. Sure.
So I would have never introduced soap. I would never have introduced WSDLs in SOAP as a standard for integration. I used to work at IBM. It was a complete disaster. And if I could have redo it right now, I would have implemented REST like it should have been done from the very beginning.
Thankfully.
And Ben loves me right
I
now.
love him right now. I mean, we reach into a lot of the market, and if you're in this room and you still have a SOAP API, don't talk to me.
Please, don't talk to me.
You know, it is painful.
Yes.
The poor quality of some of the APIs. Rick doesn't have to worry about that. He's got a great API architecture, but not everyone in the industry has a great architecture. You know, the telecom industry is not known for building wonderful APIs.
No.
So SOAP is one of the recipes of disasters.
There you go.
Correct.
Well, before we go to the next question, I want to just interject again one other thing. We talk about this tech track we're doing this afternoon. This doesn't have to be an annual event with respect to that. INCOMPAS has webinars throughout the year, and we'd be more than happy to use that, or we're open to other ideas to continue to grow the idea of increased tech representation involvement with INCOMPAS. Again, primarily the idea is in the idea of co-opetition or policy-related technology, but I just want to share that. And the other thing, since I brought up webinars, on behalf of INCOMPAS, Ben and I don't know about the rest of here, if you as a company have not used your webinar privilege to do it, I encourage you to do it.
Absolutely.
It's a great benefit that you have with respect to it, but I would look into how you can use your webinar capability with INCOMPAS. But do we have another question before the floor, or from the floor, before I continue on? If you come up with something, just get up and dance or yell at us or something, but I'll let Anand, let's let you lead off this question. In an evolving regulatory landscape, how can service providers collaborate to ensure compliance while fostering innovation in API design and usage?
I think it touches the thing, like let's not do WSDLs, that starts from there. But so with the evolving space, and everybody has their own way of doing things, to have a common way of doing things, a common structure and a payload and partnership, without which it won't be happening. So those are very critical, important steps to be able to collaborate, to be able to proceed further. And the innovation is in the area of enhanced status, right? I think I'll touch a little bit on the question earlier of self-serve. I think having these APIs and with the collaboration is going to make the things work faster rather than just not having attraction, right? It's, as you said, let's not do the busy thing. So it is going to do a lot more better turnaround, a lot more better innovation with being able to respond fast, being able to provide the service quick, and ultimately add more revenue to the books faster.
Okay.
Is that me?
Matthew?
So at Metel, we have federal customers. So you can imagine our compliancy requirements are very high. Because of that, during the sales cycle, we're transparent about our compliance with SOC 2 and ISO in our data centers. And I think that's really critical because that's where the endpoint sits, that's where the data sits. So when we talk about collaborating, it's about being transparent and being open about, hey, these are our compliance standards, this is what we support. And when you do that, then you can have that feedback loop very quickly. We can iterate very quickly, and partners and customers aren't concerned what's happening to my data.
Okay. You guys want to add anything?
From a compliance standpoint, think about location truth. The content that you put across an API matters. To get an order right, you got to know where it's delivered. To get a quote right, to prospect, to buy, to sell, across, to bill, to have an outage reported properly, to collect taxes properly, that location needs to be right. We call it location truth inside of our business, but whatever you call it, as the industry that primarily is responsible for the 911 system, you'd think we'd all embrace that logic, but just very transparently, we don't, and we need to. It will help elevate our quality and execution and the regulatory frameworks that we all operate. Look at all the challenges with the FCC broadband reporting, centers around the accuracy and the transparency of who has what where.
Anything you want to add?
Yeah, well said. No?
All right, Ben, I saved one more question for you here. Because we all want to be winners, right? How can service providers maintain a competitive edge while collaborating on API enhancements that ultimately benefit all players in the ecosystem?
Embrace standards from a payload and an industry participation like our preferred path, MEF, LSO, Sonata, but recognize and control what you put across that payload is ultimately your competitive advantage. Well, how you present it, where you present it, what you present allows you to differentiate if you're maintaining that one-for-one secure, trust flow. Ultimately is your path to winning. And if I would emphasize any one thing, think about the customer experience of your buyer or partner. And if you believe that, they need your information to show up the way they need it, that experience is part of your recipe for differentiation. And there is ample opportunity for you to embrace that and be, a leader in that thought process out there in the marketplace. Rick?
Yeah, I would agree. You hit on it with standardization. We've been talking about that, throughout the entire session. That is the key, right? And then also being as transparent and, being involved and talking about what it is that you need as far as sharing best practices across the industry. Things like that is really how I would phrase it.
Matthew, on anything you'd like to add?
Go ahead. No, I don't think I have much to add to it. I think, well, let me say this. On the winning side of it, I think it's the onboarding process. So onboarding partners or customers to your API, the easier that is, the more successful you'll be. That's why I get back to generative AI as being a major tool for that. And then that makes your business sticky between your partners and your customers.
Love that. Okay.
So I would just add one thing, you already said, same thing, right? But we all want to be winners. We all are here to make money. And until a certain time, people were doing it by throwing bodies at it. You were still making money, but you were throwing bodies at it. It was taking longer. It was overall not adding. The API, what it does it fast. You can do things quick. You can do quick fast. You can onboard fast. You can roll up services fast. And that's what is going to add more to the revenue. So I think that's very critical and important. That's how APIs help in adding more revenue to the books. And standardization aspect to it makes it easier across the ecosystem rather than just with one partner at a time. So having APIs and then having them standardized is the key for the revenue to be increased.
Wrap up here today. I want to put in a little plug here for Accent Networks. So if you're a Connect-based customer out there and you've got a lot of Type 2, Type 3 that you buy, I would love to have a conversation with your carrier relations management team to talk about what kind of lifecycle management issues you might be having that our new tool that's coming out might be able to help. So that's my own little self-servicing plug. Anyway, and Ben says it's complimentary to ConnectBase.
It is.
So, all right. With that, if there are no other questions, how about a round of applause for audience or for our panel? I think you did a great job. Thank you very much, guys. Good job. Thank you.